I stared at my computer screen in complete disbelief, refreshing my online banking page for the fifth time in 30 seconds. The numbers remained the same: $0 and 0 cents. 10 years of careful saving. 10 years of skipping vacations and driving a beat-up Honda Civic, 10 years of eating ramen noodles and shopping at thrift stores, all vanished without a trace. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone to call the bank. But before I could dial, I heard my father's voice echoing from the kitchen, dripping with satisfaction. "Thanks for your naivety, Jonas. Your money has now secured your brother's bright future." The cruel laughter that followed made my blood run cold. But then something unexpected happened. I started laughing too, and I couldn't stop. The laughter bubbling up from my chest wasn't hysteria or a mental breakdown. It was the sweet sound of vindication, because what my parents had just stolen wasn't my real money. But let me back up and explain how I got to this moment, sitting in my childhood bedroom at 32 years old, watching my family celebrate what they thought was their perfect crime. My name is Jonas Mitchell, and I work as a cybersecurity analyst for a major financial firm in downtown Phoenix. My job involves protecting people's money from criminals who want to steal it through sophisticated schemes and social engineering. The irony that my own parents had become the very predators I spent my days fighting wasn't lost on me. But in my line of work, I've learned one fundamental truth: never trust anyone completely, not even family. The journey to this moment started 10 years ago when I landed my first job out of college. While my younger brother Tyler was partying his way through his undergraduate degree, funded entirely by our parents, I was living in a studio apartment that barely qualified as habitable. The ceiling leaked when it rained, the heater worked sporadically, and I'm pretty sure something died in the walls at some point. But I didn't care about comfort. I had a goal: save enough money to buy a house and build the stable life I'd never had growing up. Every paycheck I put away 60% of my income. I watched my colleagues spend their money on expensive dinners and weekend trips to Las Vegas while I brought peanut butter sandwiches to work and spent my evenings learning new cybersecurity techniques online. My parents constantly criticized my obsessive saving habits, calling it unhealthy and suggesting I was missing out on life. They never offered help with my living expenses, though saving all their financial support for Tyler's endless educational pursuits. The favoritism wasn't subtle. Tyler was the golden child who could do no wrong, the future doctor who would bring prestige to the family name. I was the boring son who worked with computers and lived like a monk. Family dinners became exercises in listening to Tyler's latest achievements, while my accomplishments were dismissed as just technical stuff that nobody understands. When Tyler decided to pursue medical school after changing his major 3 times, our parents mortgaged their house to pay his tuition without hesitation. When I asked for a small loan to buy a reliable car after mine broke down, they told me I needed to learn financial responsibility. But about 6 months ago, something shifted in the family dynamic. Suddenly, Tyler became very interested in my financial success. The brother who had spent years calling me a money-obsessed weirdo started asking detailed questions about my investment strategies and savings goals. He wanted to know which bank I used, how much I had saved, and when I planned to buy my house. At first, I thought he was finally maturing and recognizing the value of financial planning. Then, I noticed the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered rooms. My mother began asking seemingly innocent questions about my banking habits during casual conversations. She wanted to know if I used online banking, whether I had automatic transfers set up, and if I kept all my money in one account. When I asked why she was so curious, she claimed she was thinking about modernizing her own banking and wanted to learn from my expertise. The red flags multiplied when my father started mentioning articles he'd supposedly read about young adults who were too trusting with their finances. He'd bring up cautionary tales about people who left their money vulnerable to theft or fraud, always ending with comments about how smart people protect themselves and naive people learn hard lessons. The way he emphasized the word naive felt pointed, almost mocking. 3 months ago, my suspicions crystallized into action. During a family barbecue, I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead slipped into my father's home office. Years of cybersecurity training had taught me to look for unusual patterns, and I'd noticed he'd been receiving an unusual number of phone calls that he took privately in his office. I needed to know what was happening. I quickly installed a small audio recording device behind his desk, the kind used by private investigators and law enforcement. The device was virtually invisible and could record continuously for weeks. Over the following days, I planted similar devices in the kitchen, living room, and my parents' bedroom. As a cybersecurity professional, I had access to sophisticated surveillance equipment, and I knew how to use it without detection. The recordings I captured over the next few weeks revealed the shocking truth. My parents weren't just planning to ask me for money or guilt me into helping Tyler. They were actively conspiring to steal my entire savings account. The conversations were detailed and calculating, showing months of preparation and research. Jonas is so predictable. My father's voice crackled through my headphones as I reviewed the recordings. He'll never see it coming. He's always been too trusting for his own good. My mother's response chilled me to the bone. The medical emergency story will work perfectly. We'll say Tyler needs immediate surgery that insurance won't cover. Jonas will want to help, and once he gives us account access, we can take everything. He'll be too embarrassed to report his own parents. But the most damning recording came from a conversation between Tyler and my father, where they discussed the fake medical documents they'd been preparing. Tyler had been working with someone at his medical school to create fraudulent surgical reports and insurance denials. They'd crafted an elaborate story about a rare condition that required experimental treatment only available at a private clinic in California. The beauty of it, Tyler's voice echoed through my speakers, is that Jonas knows just enough about medicine to believe the technical terms, but not enough to verify the details. We've researched his psychology perfectly. He'll want to be the hero who saves his little brother. Listening to these recordings, I realized my family saw me as nothing more than a bank account with legs. The years of feeling like an outsider, the constant criticism of my lifestyle choices, the dismissal of my achievements, it all made sense now. I wasn't their son and brother. I was their long-term financial target. The final piece of the puzzle came when I heard my father scheduling a meeting with someone he called our lawyer friend. The conversation revealed they'd been planning this theft for over a year, waiting for my savings to reach what they considered a worthwhile amount. They'd even calculated that $360,000 would be enough to pay for Tyler's remaining medical school tuition and give him seed money to start his own practice. As I sat in my apartment that night listening to my own family plan my financial destruction, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to play games with a cybersecurity expert, I would give them a game they'd never forget. But first, I needed to protect my real assets and prepare for the battle ahead. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly moving my actual savings, over $500,000, into multiple offshore accounts and cryptocurrency wallets that my parents could never trace or access. I researched the most secure international banking systems and distributed my wealth across several countries and investment platforms. The $360,000 they were planning to steal. That became bait money carefully placed in an easily accessible account with just enough security to make them feel like they were pulling off a sophisticated heist. In cybersecurity, we call these honeypots, fake targets designed to attract attackers and gather evidence of their methods. My parents were about to walk straight into the most elaborate honeypot of their lives, and I would be recording every step of their criminal activity. The stage was set, the trap was baited, and all I had to do was wait for them to take the bait. What they didn't know was that their naive son had spent years protecting other people's money from criminals. Now it was time to protect himself. The beauty of a well-designed honeypot is that the attackers never realize they're walking into a trap until it's too late. Over the next month, I watched my parents execute their plan with the confidence of people who believed they were manipulating an innocent victim. Every move they made, every lie they told, every document they forged was captured on my recording devices. But the real masterpiece was yet to come. 2 weeks after I'd moved my real assets to safety, Tyler called me with trembling urgency in his voice. The performance was actually quite convincing. If I hadn't already heard him rehearsing it with our father, I might have been fooled. He claimed he'd just received devastating news from his doctors about a rare heart condition that required immediate intervention. The surgery, he explained through carefully timed sobs, would cost exactly $350,000 and wasn't covered by insurance because it was considered experimental. Jonas. I know this is a huge ask. Tyler said, his voice breaking at precisely the right moments, but you're the only person I know who has this kind of money saved up. The doctors say I only have a few weeks to get this surgery, or the condition could become fatal. I'll pay you back as soon as I finish medical school and start practicing, I promise. I let him finish his entire performance before responding with exactly the kind of concerned, helpful response they were expecting. Tyler, of course I'll help. You're my brother. How do we make this happen? The relief in his voice was genuine, but for all the wrong reasons. He wasn't relieved about getting life-saving medical treatment. He was relieved that their Mark had taken the bait. Over the next few days, my parents guided me through the process of giving them access to my account, always framing it as temporary assistance for a family emergency. They even provided me with forged medical documents that looked surprisingly official. But here's what they didn't know. Every document they gave me, every conversation we had about the supposed surgery, every detail of their fabricated medical emergency was being forwarded to my contact at the FBI. Because 3 months earlier, when I first discovered their conspiracy, I hadn't just installed recording devices. I'd reached out to federal law enforcement. Agent Patricia Stevens of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been investigating a network of family financial fraud cases across the Southwest. When I contacted her with my recordings and evidence, she immediately recognized the pattern. My family wasn't operating alone. They were part of a larger criminal enterprise that specialized in sophisticated financial manipulation of family members. Mr. Mitchell, Agent Stevens had explained during our first meeting at a coffee shop near the federal building, what you've uncovered is much bigger than just your family situation. We've been tracking a network of lawyers, medical professionals, and family members who work together to defraud their own relatives. Your case could be the breakthrough we need to take down the entire operation. The FBI had been monitoring my communications with my family for weeks, gathering evidence not just of their plan to steal from me, but of their connections to other criminals involved in similar schemes. Agent Stevens revealed that my parents had been in contact with a lawyer named Marcus Wellington, who specialized in what he called family financial intervention, a euphemistic term for helping families steal from their most successful members. But the deeper I dug into this network, the more shocking discoveries emerged. My bank manager, David Hernandez, whom I'd known for years and considered a friend, had been providing my parents with detailed information about my account activity. When I confronted him during a seemingly casual lunch meeting, his guilty expression confirmed my suspicions before he even spoke. Jonas. I'm so sorry. David stammered, his hands shaking as he set down his coffee cup. Your father came to me months ago with some story about you being in financial trouble and needing family intervention. He showed me documents that made it look like you were involved in some kind of money laundering scheme. He said the family was trying to protect you from federal charges. The manipulation went deeper than I'd imagined. My father had convinced David that I was the criminal and that the family was trying to save me from myself. David had provided account statements, transaction histories, and even suggestions about how to access my funds most efficiently. He'd been an unwitting accomplice in their scheme, believing he was helping a concerned father protect his son. He promised me that you'd never know I was involved. David continued, his voice barely above a whisper. He said they just needed to move your money temporarily to protect it from government seizure. I thought I was helping you, Jonas. I thought I was saving your financial future. But the most devastating revelation came when David handed me a folder of documents that my father had left with him for safekeeping. Inside were detailed financial records showing that Tyler had already begun spending the money they hadn't stolen yet. Credit card statements revealed luxury purchases, a $15,000 Rolex watch, expensive dinners at upscale restaurants, and a down payment on a luxury apartment near his medical school. Tyler wasn't planning to use the stolen money for medical school tuition or starting a practice. He was living like a millionaire on money he'd convinced himself he deserved, money that rightfully belonged to me. The medical emergency was completely fabricated. Tyler was in perfect health and had been posting pictures of himself at parties and social events throughout the period when he was supposedly dying of a heart condition. But the cruelest twist was yet to come. Among the papers David showed me was a receipt from a high-end jewelry store where Tyler had purchased an engagement ring costing $28,000. He was planning to propose to his girlfriend, Sarah, using money stolen from his own brother, money I'd saved through years of sacrifice and careful planning. Sarah Richardson wasn't just Tyler's girlfriend. She was an active participant in their scheme. The medical records Tyler had used to support his fictional heart condition. Sarah worked for the company that managed medical records for several major hospitals in the region. She'd been falsifying documents and using her professional access to create convincing medical narratives that would justify large financial requests. As I sat in that coffee shop with David looking at the evidence of my family's betrayal, I realized that the $360,000 they were planning to steal represented more than just money to them. It represented their ticket to a lifestyle they felt entitled to but had never earned. Tyler saw my savings as his inheritance money that should rightfully fund his dreams because he was the chosen son, the future doctor, the family investment. My parents weren't just stealing money, they were stealing the future I'd worked so hard to build. Every dollar in that account represented a sacrifice I'd made, a luxury I'd foregone, a choice to invest in tomorrow instead of enjoying today. They were taking 10 years of my life and handing it over to Tyler like a birthday gift. But what they didn't understand was that their naive son had been 3 steps ahead of them from the beginning. The money they were so eager to steal was sitting in that account like cheese in a mousetrap, waiting for them to take the bait. And when they finally made their move, I'd have everything I needed to destroy their lives just as thoroughly as they'd planned to destroy mine. The federal investigation was ready to move forward, but Agent Stevens needed one final piece of evidence: recorded confessions from my family members admitting to their crimes. The honeypot had attracted the criminals, but now it was time to close the trap and capture them in the act. As I walked home from my meeting with David, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. My parents had raised me to believe that trust was the foundation of family relationships. They were about to learn that their son had internalized a very different lesson in a world full of predators. The only way to protect yourself is to be smarter, more prepared, and more ruthless than the people trying to destroy you. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and tomorrow I would give them the performance of a lifetime. The naive, trusting son who never saw it coming. But this time, I would be the one laughing when the game was over. The morning after my meeting with David, I woke up to find 17 missed calls on my phone and a text message that made my blood run cold. "Jonas, we need to talk immediately. There's been a legal development regarding your mental health evaluation. Come to the house now." Dad. Through my network of cybersecurity contacts, I'd been monitoring my family's digital communications, and what I discovered that morning shattered any remaining illusion that this was simply about stealing money. My parents had filed a petition in court claiming I was mentally unstable and seeking emergency conservatorship over all my financial assets. The legal documents, which I accessed through channels I can't fully disclose, painted a picture of me as a dangerous individual suffering from paranoid delusions about money and technology. They cited my obsessive hoarding behaviors, my antisocial lifestyle choices, and most damning of all, my installation of recording devices in their home as evidence of severe mental instability requiring immediate intervention. Marcus Wellington, their attorney, had crafted a narrative that was both sophisticated and terrifying in its completeness. According to the filing, I'd become increasingly isolated and paranoid over the past year, exhibiting signs of what they termed financial psychosis, an invented condition that supposedly caused people to develop irrational attachments to money and delusions about family members trying to steal from them. The petition included falsified statements from neighbors claiming they'd witnessed erratic behavior, forged medical records suggesting a history of mental health treatment, and even manufactured evidence of threatening communications I'd allegedly sent to family members. Every piece of documentation looked official and convincing, the work of professionals who clearly specialized in this type of fraud. But the most chilling discovery came when I hacked into Dr. Helen Rodriguez's computer system. Dr. Rodriguez was the psychiatrist who'd signed off on my mental health evaluation, an evaluation that had supposedly taken place over several sessions, despite the fact that I'd never met this woman in my life. Her computer contained detailed psychological profiles of dozens of people she'd never examined, all following the same pattern: financially successful individuals whose families wanted access to their assets. Dr. Rodriguez had been declaring people mentally incompetent for over 3 years, working in coordination with Marcus Wellington's law firm to process what amounted to legal theft on an industrial scale. Her files contained names, addresses, and financial information for 68 victims across Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. Each case followed the same blueprint. Family members would approach Wellington's firm claiming concern about a relative's mental health. Wellington would refer them to Dr. Rodriguez for evaluation, and Rodriguez would produce a psychological assessment, declaring the person incompetent without ever meeting them. The financial records in her system revealed the scope of their operation. Dr. Rodriguez received $25,000 for each fraudulent evaluation, while Wellington's firm collected percentage-based fees from the assets they helped families access. Together, they'd stolen over $2.3 million from unsuspecting victims over the past 4 years. But my case was different from the others in one crucial way: the amount of money involved was significantly larger, and they'd been building their false narrative for much longer. My parents hadn't just stumbled into this scheme. They'd been planning it for over a year, carefully documenting every interaction with me to support their eventual claim that I was mentally unfit to manage my own finances. The altered medical records were the most sophisticated part of their deception. Sarah Richardson had used her access to medical databases to modify my childhood health records, inserting references to developmental disorders and behavioral issues that had never existed. A broken arm I'd sustained in Little League became evidence of self-destructive tendencies. A case of chickenpox in elementary school was reframed as a stress-related immune system failure, indicating underlying psychological instability. They'd even modified school records from 20 years ago, changing teacher comments about my quiet personality into concerns about antisocial behavior and difficulty forming healthy relationships with peers. Every positive aspect of my childhood had been twisted into evidence of mental deficiency, creating a false narrative that stretched back to my earliest years. Tyler's role in this operation went far beyond simply spending stolen money. He'd been systematically documenting our conversations for months, using a recording app on his phone to capture what sounded like concerning statements when taken out of context. A casual comment about not trusting banks completely became evidence of paranoid delusions about financial institutions. My explanation of basic cybersecurity practices was edited to sound like obsessive conspiracy theories about technology surveillance. The recordings Tyler had created were masterfully edited, removing context and combining separate statements to create conversations that had never actually occurred. In one fabricated exchange, I supposedly confessed to knowing they were all against me and threatened to make them pay for underestimating me. The actual conversations had been about completely different topics, but Tyler's editing made it sound like I was planning violence against my own family. Sarah's involvement extended beyond medical record manipulation. She'd been researching my online activity, creating screenshots of my professional cybersecurity work, and presenting it as evidence of dangerous hacking activities. My legitimate access to security systems for work purposes was being characterized as criminal behavior, and my knowledge of financial protection strategies was being twisted into evidence of criminal intent. The timeline they'd established was ingenious in its calculated cruelty. The court filing claimed my mental deterioration had accelerated dramatically over the past 6 months, coinciding perfectly with their increased attention to my financial situation. Every interaction they'd initiated was being used as evidence that I was becoming increasingly unstable and paranoid, when in reality their suspicious behavior had simply triggered my professional instincts for detecting threats. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 72 hours from that morning, barely giving me enough time to respond legally, even if I'd been aware of the proceedings. If their petition succeeded, Marcus Wellington would be appointed as conservator over all my assets, including accounts they didn't even know existed. My parents would have legal control over my finances, my living situation, and, potentially, my medical decisions. But what they didn't realize was that their mentally unstable target had been working with federal law enforcement for months, gathering evidence of their criminal enterprise. The FBI had been monitoring every aspect of their operation, documenting the connections between my family Wellington's law firm, Dr. Rodriguez's practice, and the broader network of financial predators operating across multiple states. Agent Stevens called me that afternoon with urgent news that changed everything about our timeline. "Jonas, they're moving faster than we anticipated. We need to accelerate our operation before that hearing takes place. If Wellington gains legal conservatorship, it'll complicate our ability to use you as an undercover operative." The federal investigation had uncovered even more disturbing information about my family's criminal associates. Marcus Wellington wasn't just a corrupt lawyer. He was the architect of a sophisticated criminal organization that had been operating for over a decade. The conservatorship scheme was just one of several methods they used to separate people from their assets. Dr. Rodriguez's psychiatric evaluations were being used in divorce proceedings to help spouses hide assets in elder abuse cases, where adult children wanted to control aging parents' finances, and in business disputes where partners wanted to eliminate each other from profitable ventures. The scope of their criminal network extended far beyond family financial fraud into corporate espionage, insurance fraud, and identity theft operations. But the most shocking revelation came when Agent Stevens showed me surveillance photos of Tyler meeting with known criminals involved in prescription drug trafficking. Tyler's gambling addiction, which I'd assumed was limited to online poker and sports betting, actually involved high-stakes underground games controlled by organized crime figures. His debts weren't just financial obligations. They were threats to his physical safety that had pushed him into selling stolen prescription medications from his medical school. The federal investigation revealed that Tyler owed over $150,000 to loan sharks connected to a Mexican cartel operating in Phoenix. Sarah had been helping him steal controlled substances from the hospital system where she worked, using her access to medical records to cover their tracks. The money they planned to steal from me wasn't just funding Tyler's medical career. It was keeping him alive. My parents knew about Tyler's dangerous debts and had been pressured by his creditors to find a solution quickly. The conservatorship scheme wasn't just about greed. It was about saving Tyler's life by paying off criminals who had threatened to kill him if he didn't settle his accounts within 60 days. This revelation transformed my understanding of the entire situation. My family wasn't just betraying me for money. They were sacrificing my financial future to save Tyler from the consequences of his own criminal behavior. They'd decided that my decade of hard work and careful saving was worth less than protecting their golden child from the results of his addiction and poor choices. As I prepared for the confrontation that would determine the outcome of this entire ordeal, I realized that the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. This wasn't just about recovering stolen money or getting justice for betrayal. This was about exposing a criminal network that had destroyed dozens of families and corrupted multiple professional institutions. The trap I'd set with FBI assistance was about to capture much bigger prey than I'd ever anticipated. But first, I had to survive the most dangerous performance of my life, convincing my family that their naive son had no idea what was coming, while secretly recording the confessions that would send them to federal prison for decades. The game was about to reach its climax, and I was ready to watch my family destroy themselves with their own arrogance and greed. The phone call from Agent Stevens came at exactly 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 hours before the emergency conservatorship hearing was scheduled to begin. Her voice carried an urgency I'd never heard before, and her words changed everything about our carefully planned operation. "Jonas, we need to move immediately. Our surveillance detected unusual activity around Tyler's apartment last night. The people he owes money to are getting impatient, and they're planning to escalate their collection methods today. If we don't arrest your family before that hearing, Tyler might not survive long enough to face federal charges. 6 weeks earlier, when I'd first contacted the FBI with evidence of my family's conspiracy, I thought I was reporting a simple case of financial fraud. Agent Stevens had patiently explained that my situation was far more complex than I realized, connecting to a federal investigation that had been ongoing for 18 months. The FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force had been tracking a sophisticated network of professionals who specialized in what they called legal theft, using legitimate legal and medical institutions to steal money from victims who had no idea they were being targeted. My family's scheme wasn't an isolated incident. It was one operation within a criminal enterprise that stretched across multiple states and involved dozens of corrupt professionals. Mr. Mitchell, Agent Stevens had explained during our first official meeting at the federal building, your case represents the missing piece we've been searching for. Marcus Wellington's law firm has been operating this conservatorship fraud for years, but we've never had an inside operative who could help us gather evidence in real time. You're not just a victim. You're our best chance to bring down the entire network. The federal investigation had started when a whistleblower in Nevada reported suspicious patterns in conservatorship cases being processed through certain law firms. Too many financially successful individuals were being declared mentally incompetent by the same small group of psychiatrists, and the families gaining control of their assets all seemed to be working with the same legal representatives. Agent Stevens showed me files containing evidence of systematic financial abuse that made my family's betrayal look simple by comparison. Dr. Helen Rodriguez had been falsely diagnosing people as mentally incompetent for over 4 years, working with a network of corrupt lawyers to process what amounted to legalized robbery. But the scope of their criminal activities extended far beyond conservatorship fraud. The task force had documented cases where Wellington's firm had helped families manipulate elderly relatives into changing their wills assisted in divorce proceedings, by falsely claiming spouses were mentally unfit to make financial decisions, and even worked with business partners to steal from their own companies by having co-owners declared incompetent. Dr. Rodriguez's computer system, which I'd helped the FBI access through my cybersecurity expertise, contained evidence of over 200 fraudulent evaluations. Each psychological assessment followed the same template with minor details changed to fit the specific victim and family situation. She'd been earning between $25,000 and $50,000 per evaluation, generating over $3 million in criminal income over 4 years. But my case was unique within their investigation, because I'd been gathering evidence independently and had managed to infiltrate their operation without detection. The FBI needed an undercover operative who could record confessions and gather evidence of criminal intent, and I was perfectly positioned to play that role. The beauty of your situation, Agent Stevens had explained, is that they think they're manipulating you when actually you'll be manipulating them into confessing their crimes on federal recording equipment. The surveillance operation had been running for months, with FBI agents monitoring communications between my parents, Tyler Sarah Marcus Wellington, and Dr. Rodriguez. The evidence they'd gathered revealed connections to organized crime that transformed a financial fraud case into something much more serious. Tyler's gambling debts weren't just personal problems. They connected my family's scheme to a money laundering operation run by cartel associates operating in Phoenix. The loan sharks Tyler owed money to were using his medical school access to steal and resell prescription drugs, generating profits that were being laundered through legitimate businesses owned by the same criminal organization. Sarah Richardson's role in the operation extended far beyond falsifying medical records for conservatorship cases. The FBI had discovered that she was selling patient information to identity theft rings, providing personal details about thousands of people to criminals who used the information for credit fraud, insurance scams, and tax return theft. Her computer system at the medical records company contained files on over 10,000 patients, including social security numbers, insurance information, medical histories, and family contact details. This information was being sold to criminal organizations for prices ranging from $50 to $500 per complete identity profile. The federal investigation had tracked the flow of stolen money through multiple businesses and offshore accounts, revealing a sophisticated criminal network that generated over $15 million in illegal income annually. My family's participation in this network wasn't accidental. They'd been recruited because Tyler's medical school access and Sarah's position in the healthcare system made them valuable assets to the organization. But the most shocking discovery came when the FBI revealed that my parents had been involved in suspicious activities long before they'd targeted my savings account. The investigation into my grandfather's death 5 years earlier had uncovered evidence suggesting that his passing hadn't been natural, despite the official cause of death being listed as heart failure. Medical records obtained through the federal investigation showed that my grandfather had been taking prescribed heart medications that were mysteriously discontinued in the weeks before his death. Pharmacy records indicated that my father had been picking up grandfather's prescriptions, but had stopped filling them without medical authorization. The $300,000 inheritance my father had received from grandfather's estate had been used to pay gambling debts that my parents had concealed from the rest of the family. My father's financial problems went back years before Tyler's current crisis, suggesting a pattern of criminal behavior that extended far beyond their scheme to steal my money. Agent Stevens explained that the federal investigation would use my case as the catalyst for a coordinated operation targeting the entire criminal network. On the morning of the conservatorship hearing, FBI agents would simultaneously raid Marcus Wellington's law office, Dr. Rodriguez's psychiatric practice, the medical records company where Sarah worked, and Tyler's apartment. "We need you to wear a wire during your family confrontation," Agent Stevens had instructed during our final planning meeting. "Your parents and Tyler believe they're about to win the biggest score of their criminal careers. Their confidence will make them careless, and we need them to confess their crimes on federal recording equipment." The FBI had provided me with sophisticated surveillance devices that were virtually undetectable, designed to capture high-quality audio, even in challenging environments. The plan was for me to visit my parents' house under the pretense of discussing the conservatorship hearing while actually gathering final evidence needed to secure federal convictions. But as Agent Stevens explained the timeline for the coordinated raids, I realized that my family's criminal behavior had put them in danger from multiple directions. Tyler's cartel creditors were planning to collect their debts through violence. Marcus Wellington's criminal associates were pressuring him to accelerate their money laundering operations, and Dr. Rodriguez was being investigated by state medical boards for her fraudulent evaluations. "Jonas, you need to understand that this operation is about much more than recovering your stolen money," Agent Stevens said as we reviewed the final details. "We're dismantling a criminal organization that has destroyed hundreds of families and corrupted multiple professional institutions. Your courage in coming forward has made it possible to bring justice to victims across multiple states." The federal charges being prepared included conspiracy, money laundering, identity theft, Medicare fraud prescription, drug trafficking, and potentially murder charges related to my grandfather's death. My parents faced the possibility of spending the rest of their lives in federal prison, while Tyler and Sarah could receive sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. But the investigation had also revealed that my family had been stealing from other people beyond just me. Financial records showed unexplained income over the past 3 years that couldn't be accounted for by their legitimate jobs or investments. They'd been targeting other family members, friends, and even elderly neighbors in smaller-scale fraud operations that had generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in criminal profits. As I prepared for the most dangerous performance of my life, I understood that the stakes extended far beyond my personal situation. The evidence I gathered during my wired confrontation with my family would help the FBI dismantle a criminal network that had been operating with impunity for years, stealing millions of dollars from unsuspecting victims. The trap I'd set with $360,000 in bait money was about to capture criminals whose activities had ruined countless lives. But first I had to convince my family that their naive son was walking blindly into their carefully planned legal ambush while actually recording the confessions that would send them to federal prison for decades. The counterstrike was about to begin, and I was ready to watch my family destroy themselves with their own criminal arrogance. The FBI surveillance van looked like any other utility vehicle parked on my parents' street that Sunday afternoon, but I knew Agent Stevens and her team were monitoring every word through the sophisticated recording equipment hidden beneath my shirt. The wire was so small and well concealed that I'd almost forgotten I was wearing it, but its presence reminded me that this conversation would determine the fate of my family and potentially dozens of other victims. I knocked on the front door of the house where I'd grown up carrying a folder of documents that my parents believed contained evidence of my mental breakdown, but actually held FBI-prepared materials designed to encourage incriminating statements. My mother answered with a smile that looked genuinely warm, but felt completely false, given what I now knew about her intentions. "Jonas, sweetheart, come in. We're so worried about you," she said, guiding me toward the dining room where my father and Tyler were already seated around the table. "We've been discussing the legal situation, and we really think this conservatorship is the best way to protect you from making decisions you might regret later." The performance I gave over the next 90 minutes was the most challenging acting of my life. I had to appear devastated by their betrayal while secretly encouraging them to provide increasingly detailed confessions of their criminal activities. Every question I asked, every emotional response I displayed was carefully calculated to draw out information that the FBI could use in federal court. "I don't understand how this happened," I said, my voice trembling with manufactured confusion. "Tyler told me he needed money for medical treatment, but now you're saying I'm mentally incompetent. How does helping my brother make me crazy?" My father leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who believed he'd outsmarted a dangerous opponent. The wine he'd been drinking throughout our conversation had loosened his tongue, and he began explaining their scheme with the kind of detailed pride that criminals sometimes display when they think they've achieved the perfect crime. "Jonas, you've always been too trusting for your own good." He said, his words slightly slurred, but his meaning crystal clear. "We've been watching you obsess over that money for years, living like a monk, refusing to enjoy life or help your family when we needed support. That money was just sitting there doing nothing while Tyler struggled to build his future." Tyler joined the conversation with enthusiasm that revealed just how much he'd enjoyed manipulating me over the past months. "The medical emergency story was brilliant, wasn't it? I spent weeks researching rare heart conditions to make sure you'd believe the diagnosis. Sarah helped me create documents that looked completely legitimate. You never suspected a thing." But the conversation took an even darker turn when my mother began describing the months of preparation that had gone into their legal strategy. She revealed details about how they'd researched my psychology, documented my behaviors, and carefully built their case for conservatorship over almost a year of planning. "We knew you'd eventually figure out that we'd taken the money," she explained with clinical detachment that chilled me to the bone. "But by then we'd have legal control over all your assets through the conservatorship." Marcus Wellington explained that once someone is declared mentally incompetent, it's almost impossible for them to regain control of their finances. The recording equipment captured every word as my parents detailed their criminal conspiracy with increasing confidence. They described their relationships with Marcus Wellington and Dr. Rodriguez, explaining how the network operated and how much money they'd paid for fraudulent services. They even discussed other families they knew who'd used similar strategies to gain control of relatives' assets. Tyler contributed additional incriminating details about the prescription drug trafficking operation he'd been running with Sarah's help. He bragged about how they'd been stealing controlled substances from his medical school and her hospital system, selling them to organized crime figures to generate income beyond what they could steal from family members. The pharmaceutical theft was actually Sarah's idea, Tyler revealed with disturbing pride. "She showed me how easy it was to access medication supplies and alter inventory records to cover missing drugs. We've been making thousands of dollars every month selling to people who redistribute them on the street." But the most shocking confession came when the conversation turned to family history, and my father began reminiscing about previous financial interventions he'd conducted over the years. The wine and his sense of victory had completely destroyed his judgment, and he started revealing information that even Tyler and my mother didn't know about. "Handling problems in this family isn't new for me," my father said, his voice taking on a disturbing, nostalgic tone. "When your grandfather was causing difficulties with his estate planning 5 years ago, I had to take action to protect the family's financial interests. My mother looked confused by this statement, but Tyler and I both understood the implication immediately. My father was confessing to something far more serious than financial fraud, and the FBI recording equipment was capturing every word. "Dad, what do you mean you handled grandfather's problems?" Tyler asked, his voice showing the first signs of concern I'd heard from him all day. My father's response sent a chill through the room that even my parents couldn't ignore. "Your grandfather was planning to change his will and leave most of his estate to some cancer research charity, instead of keeping the money in the family where it belonged. I couldn't let that happen, especially when Tyler's education was going to require substantial financial support." The details that followed revealed a calculated murder that had been disguised as natural death. My father described how he'd gradually withheld my grandfather's heart medications over several weeks, replacing them with placebos that looked identical to the prescribed pills. When grandfather experienced the heart episode that killed him, my father had delayed calling for medical assistance long enough to ensure that intervention wouldn't be successful. "The beautiful thing about that situation," my father continued with horrifying matter-of-factness, "is that everyone expected an elderly man with heart problems to die naturally. The doctors never questioned the timeline or investigated whether his medications had been tampered with. I inherited $300,000 and nobody ever suspected that grandfather's death was anything other than unfortunate, but predictable." My mother's face had gone pale as she realized her husband was confessing to murder in front of their children, but Tyler's reaction was even more disturbing. Instead of horror at learning his grandfather had been killed to fund his education, he seemed impressed by the sophistication of the plan and grateful for the sacrifice that had been made on his behalf. "So, grandfather's money paid for my undergraduate degree?" Tyler asked with what sounded like appreciation rather than revulsion. "I never knew you'd gone that far to support my education. That's actually incredible planning." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with my family providing increasingly detailed confessions about their criminal activities, their relationships with other criminals, and their plans for using my stolen money to expand their illegal operations. They discussed specific amounts stolen from other victims' names of corrupt professionals they'd worked with, and locations where evidence of their crimes could be found. Sarah arrived during the final portion of the recording, contributing additional incriminating information about the medical records fraud and identity theft operations she'd been running through her hospital job. She revealed that they'd been selling patient information to criminal organizations for over 2 years, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in illegal income that had funded Tyler's gambling and their shared lifestyle of luxury purchases. "The identity theft business has been incredibly profitable," Sarah explained with the casual tone of someone discussing a legitimate job. "Medical records contain everything criminals need to steal people's identities completely. We've been selling comprehensive packages that include social security numbers, insurance information, family contacts, and medical histories. Each complete identity profile sells for between $300 and $800. By the time the recording session ended, the FBI had captured confessions to multiple federal crimes, including conspiracy fraud, money laundering, identity theft prescription, drug trafficking, and murder. My family had provided enough incriminating information to secure convictions not just against themselves, but against the entire criminal network they'd been working with for years. As I prepared to leave my parents' house for what I knew would be the last time as a free man's son, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The Wire had captured everything the FBI needed to destroy the criminal organization that had corrupted my family, but it had also recorded the complete moral collapse of the people who'd raised me. Walking to my car, I knew that within hours, federal agents would be arresting everyone who'd participated in the conversation I'd just recorded. The evidence they'd provided would send them to federal prison for decades and help the FBI recover millions of dollars stolen from victims across multiple states. The trap I'd set with my honeypot savings account had worked perfectly, but the prey I'd caught was far more dangerous and morally corrupt than I'd ever imagined. My family hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen lives, identities, and even murdered a family member to fund their criminal enterprises. As I drove away from the house where I'd grown up, I understood that the justice about to be served would be far more comprehensive and devastating than anything I'd originally planned. The FBI wire had captured not just confessions to financial fraud, but evidence of a criminal conspiracy that had destroyed dozens of families and corrupted multiple professional institutions. The game was almost over, and my family was about to discover that their naive son had been playing several moves ahead of them from the very beginning. At exactly 6 a.m. the following morning, I sat in Agent Stevens's surveillance vehicle 3 blocks away from my parents' house, watching through high-definition monitors as FBI tactical teams positioned themselves for coordinated raids across Phoenix. The radio chatter from multiple teams painted a picture of the most complex federal operation I'd ever witnessed, targeting criminal enterprises across the city simultaneously. Team Alpha, in position at the Wellington residence, crackled through the communication system. Team Beta ready at the Rodriguez clinic. Team Charlie staged for the medical records facility raid. Team Delta surrounding the suspect apartment complex. All units report ready for synchronized execution. Agent Stevens turned to me with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with genuine concern for my emotional state. "Jonas, what you're about to witness will effectively end your family as you've known it for your entire life. Are you prepared for the reality of seeing them arrested and charged with federal crimes?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely certain I understood the full emotional impact of what was about to happen. Over the past months, I'd focused so intensely on gathering evidence and planning their downfall that I hadn't fully processed the fact that my parents and brother would likely spend decades in federal prison as a result of the operation I'd helped orchestrate. The first raid began at Marcus Wellington's law office, where FBI financial crimes specialists had been preparing to seize documents and computer systems that contained evidence of criminal activities spanning multiple states. Through the surveillance feed, I watched agents in tactical gear storm through the front entrance, while others secured rear exits and parking areas. Wellington himself was arrested in his home office, still wearing pajamas and expressing shocked indignation at being dragged from his house in handcuffs. The search of his residence revealed over $400,000 in cash hidden in a basement safe, along with falsified legal documents and detailed client files that documented years of systematic financial fraud. But the most dramatic footage came from the raid on Dr. Rodriguez's psychiatric practice, where agents discovered evidence that exceeded even the FBI's expectations. Hidden cameras in her office had recorded hundreds of fake psychiatric evaluations, showing her reading from scripts while supposedly conducting professional assessments of people she'd never met. The computer system seized from her clinic contained video files of Rodriguez practicing her fake evaluations, rehearsing the concerned medical professional persona she used to convince courts that financially successful individuals were mentally incompetent. She'd been recording herself for quality control purposes, creating a comprehensive library of evidence that would ensure her conviction on multiple federal charges. Team Charlie has recovered over 2 terabytes of patient data from the medical records facility, reported the agent coordinating the Sarah Richardson arrest. Subject was attempting to destroy computer hard drives when agents entered the building. We've recovered evidence of identity theft operations targeting over 15,000 individuals across the region. The raid on Tyler's apartment provided the most shocking discoveries of the entire operation. FBI agents found a sophisticated prescription drug trafficking operation that was far more extensive than anyone had realized. Tyler and Sarah had been stealing controlled substances not just from his medical school and her hospital, but from multiple healthcare facilities across the Phoenix metropolitan area. The apartment contained over $50,000 worth of stolen prescription medications, detailed customer list for drug distribution networks, and evidence of connections to organized crime figures involved in international drug trafficking. Tyler had been selling to dealers who redistributed the medications to criminal organizations operating across the Southwest and into Mexico. But the most disturbing evidence came from Tyler's computer, which contained communications with cartel associates who'd been using his medical school access to gather information about potential kidnapping and extortion targets. The gambling debts that had motivated Tyler's criminal activities were connected to a money laundering operation that financed human trafficking and other serious crimes. Subject Tyler Mitchell was attempting to flush evidence down the toilet when agents entered. "Iwa," came the radio report from Team Delta. "We've recovered documentation of prescription drug sales totaling over $300,000 over the past 18 months. Subject was also in possession of a loaded firearm and threatened agents during initial contact." The arrest footage showed Tyler resisting violently as FBI agents subdued him, screaming threats and accusations while being handcuffed in his apartment hallway. The transformation from the charming medical student persona he'd maintained around family to the desperate criminal-fighting federal agents was startling to witness through the surveillance monitors. Sarah Richardson's arrest at the medical records facility revealed the full scope of her identity theft operation. FBI computer specialists discovered that she'd been selling personal information to criminal organizations for over 3 years, generating more than $800,000 in illegal income that had funded Tyler's gambling addiction and their shared lifestyle. The database she'd been maintaining contained detailed personal information on over 20,000 patients, including social security numbers, insurance details, family contacts, and medical histories. This information had been packaged and sold to identity theft rings, insurance fraud operations, and organized crime groups for prices ranging from $200 to $1,000 per complete identity profile. But the raid that affected me most emotionally was the arrest of my parents at their home. Through the surveillance feed, I watched FBI agents enter the house where I'd grown up, systematically searching every room, while my mother cried hysterically and my father demanded to speak with Marcus Wellington, apparently not realizing that his lawyer had been arrested simultaneously. The search of my parents' home revealed evidence that their criminal activities extended far beyond their scheme to steal my money. Hidden in my father's office were financial documents showing suspicious income sources dating back over 5 years, suggesting a pattern of criminal behavior that predated Tyler's current legal troubles. Agents discovered correspondence between my father and multiple corrupt professionals, indicating his involvement in several other conservatorship fraud cases involving elderly victims across Arizona. He'd been working with Wellington's network to target senior citizens whose families wanted access to their estates before natural inheritance occurred. The most damning evidence found in their house was a detailed planning notebook in my mother's handwriting, documenting their year-long conspiracy to steal my savings and gain legal control over my finances. The notebook contained research about my personality analysis of my banking habits and strategic plans for manipulating me into providing account access. But the discovery that changed the entire legal landscape was evidence related to my grandfather's death. FBI agents found medications hidden in my father's closet that matched the prescriptions my grandfather had been taking before his death, along with identical-looking placebo pills that had apparently been used to replace his actual heart medication. Medical records seized from Dr. Rodriguez's practice revealed that she'd been involved in falsifying my grandfather's death certificate, working with my father to ensure that the murder appeared to be natural death from heart failure. The federal investigation into grandfather's death would now include charges of first-degree murder, in addition to the financial fraud crimes. All primary suspects have been secured, Agent Stevens announced as the coordinated raids reached completion. We've arrested 12 individuals connected to the criminal network, seized over $2 million in cash and assets, and recovered evidence of crimes affecting hundreds of victims across multiple states. The final arrest came when FBI agents apprehended Marcus Wellington's business partner, a corrupt judge who'd been approving fraudulent conservatorship petitions in exchange for financial kickbacks. Judge Patricia Morrison had been facilitating the legal theft of assets from dozens of families using her judicial authority to legitimize criminal activities that had generated millions of dollars in illegal profits. As I watched the last arrest footage, I realized that the federal investigation had uncovered a criminal enterprise far more extensive and dangerous than anyone had initially suspected. My family's scheme to steal my savings had been just one operation within a network of professional criminals who'd corrupted multiple institutions and destroyed hundreds of lives. The evidence gathered during the raids would support federal prosecutions involving conspiracy, money laundering, prescription drug trafficking, identity theft, Medicare fraud, judicial corruption, and murder charges. The sentences facing my family members and their criminal associates would likely result in life imprisonment for the most serious offenders. Agent Stevens turned off the surveillance monitors and looked at me with an expression that combined professional satisfaction with genuine sympathy for the emotional trauma I was experiencing. Jonas, the evidence your family provided during yesterday's recorded conversation, combined with what we've recovered in today's raids, will dismantle one of the most sophisticated financial fraud operations we've ever investigated. As we drove away from the staging area, I understood that the justice being served was far more comprehensive than anything I'd originally envisioned when I first discovered my family's betrayal. The honeypot trap I'd set had captured not just petty criminals, but dangerous predators whose activities had corrupted multiple professional institutions and destroyed countless innocent lives. The game was over, but the legal proceedings that would determine my family's fate were just beginning. 6 months after watching my family members being arrested in coordinated federal raids, I sat in the same Phoenix courthouse where they'd planned to have me declared mentally incompetent, listening to a federal judge deliver sentences that would effectively end their lives as free citizens. The courtroom was packed with victims from across 3 states, many of whom had traveled hundreds of miles to witness justice being served against the criminal network that had destroyed their families. Tyler was the first to face sentencing, and his transformation from confident medical student to desperate federal defendant was complete. The judge had reviewed evidence of his prescription drug trafficking operation, which had generated over $400,000 in illegal income over 18 months. The connections to organized crime figures and cartel associates had elevated his charges to federal trafficking offenses that carried mandatory minimum sentences. Mr. Tyler Mitchell, Judge Harrison announced with stern authority, "You have been convicted of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, identity theft, and participation in a criminal enterprise. The court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution of $650,000 to victims of your criminal activities." Tyler's collapse was immediate and dramatic. The realization that he would spend the next 12 years in federal prison, followed by years of supervised probation, seemed to finally penetrate his delusion that charm and family connections could protect him from consequences. His medical career was permanently destroyed. His relationship with Sarah was over, and his gambling debts to organized crime figures remained unpaid, creating additional dangers he would face even after release. Sarah Richardson received 8 years in federal prison for her role in the identity theft ring and medical records fraud operation. The judge noted that her position of trust in the healthcare system had made her crimes particularly egregious, as she'd violated the privacy and security of thousands of patients who'd trusted medical institutions with their personal information. Ms. Richardson, your systematic theft of patient information represents one of the largest healthcare privacy breaches this court has encountered, Judge Harrison stated. Your actions have compromised the financial security and personal safety of over 20,000 individuals who trusted medical institutions with their most private information. Marcus Wellington received the longest sentence among the professional criminals, reflecting his role as the architect of the entire fraudulent conservatorship network. 15 years in federal prison would effectively end his legal career and ensure that he spent most of his remaining productive years incarcerated for crimes against vulnerable families across multiple states. Mr. Wellington, you corrupted the legal system that citizens depend upon for protection against exactly the kind of predatory behavior you orchestrated, the judge declared with obvious anger. Your abuse of legal procedures designed to protect vulnerable individuals represents a fundamental betrayal of professional ethics and public trust. Dr. Rodriguez received 10 years in federal prison for her role in creating fraudulent psychiatric evaluations that had enabled the theft of millions of dollars from unsuspecting victims. The evidence recovered from her practice had revealed the systematic nature of her criminal activities, documenting over 200 fake evaluations conducted over 4 years. But the most emotionally devastating sentences were reserved for my parents, whose criminal activities had extended far beyond their scheme to steal my savings. My father faced the most serious charges, including first-degree murder in my grandfather's death conspiracy to commit fraud and his role as a coordinator within the larger criminal enterprise. Mr. Robert Mitchell, the court, finds that your criminal activities represent a pattern of predatory behavior spanning multiple years and targeting the most vulnerable members of your own family, Judge Harrison announced with cold precision. Your murder of your own father to inherit his estate demonstrates a level of callous calculation that demands the maximum possible sentence. My father received 25 years in federal prison for his role in the criminal conspiracy, plus an additional life sentence for the murder of my grandfather. At 62 years old, he would likely die in federal custody, never again experiencing freedom or the opportunity to harm other vulnerable people. My mother's sentence of 18 years reflected her extensive involvement in coordinating the financial aspects of the criminal enterprise, including her research and documentation of potential targets. Her detailed notebook had provided federal prosecutors with a roadmap of the conspiracy that had made convictions possible for multiple defendants. Mrs. Linda Mitchell, your role as the operational coordinator of this criminal enterprise makes you equally responsible for the harm inflicted upon hundreds of victims, the judge stated. Your systematic research and targeting of vulnerable individuals demonstrates a level of premeditation that demands substantial punishment. The restitution orders against my family and their criminal associates totaled over $3.2 million money that would be distributed among victims whose lives had been destroyed by the fraudulent conservatorship network. The federal investigation had recovered assets hidden in offshore accounts, real estate purchases, and luxury items that would be liquidated to provide compensation for financial losses. But the most satisfying aspect of the sentencing hearing was the victim impact statements that preceded the judge's decisions. Family after family testified about the devastating effects of having their loved ones falsely declared mentally incompetent and their life savings stolen by corrupt professionals who'd betrayed positions of public trust. An elderly woman named Margaret Phillips described how Wellington's firm had helped her adult children steal her retirement savings by claiming she was suffering from dementia that didn't exist. I worked for 45 years as a school teacher, saving every penny for my retirement, only to have my own children steal everything I'd earned with the help of these criminals. She testified through tears. A middle-aged man named David Chen explained how Dr. Rodriguez had falsely declared his brother mentally incompetent, enabling family members to steal over $200,000 from a small business they'd built together. These people didn't just steal money, he said with quiet anger. They stole trust between family members and destroyed relationships that can never be repaired. Listening to these victim statements, I realized that my family's betrayal was part of a much larger pattern of criminal behavior that had destroyed dozens of families and corrupted multiple professional institutions. The justice being served wasn't just about my personal situation. It was about protecting society from predators who exploited family relationships and professional positions to commit sophisticated financial crimes. The federal investigation had also revealed additional stolen assets that belonged to me, including money my father had hidden after murdering my grandfather 5 years earlier. The inheritance that should have come to me naturally was recovered and returned, increasing my financial resources by over $400,000 that I'd never known existed. But beyond the financial recovery, the most valuable outcome was the knowledge that other families would be protected from the criminal network that had targeted my savings. The FBI's investigation had led to reforms in conservatorship procedures, enhanced security measures for medical record systems, and increased oversight of psychiatric evaluations used in legal proceedings. 6 months after the sentencing hearing, I used my experience and recovered assets to establish the Financial Family Protection Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping families recognize and prevent financial abuse by relatives and corrupt professionals. My background in cybersecurity provided valuable expertise in developing fraud detection systems that banks and legal institutions could use to identify suspicious conservatorship petitions and protective strategies. The Foundation's work expanded rapidly as word spread about resources available for families dealing with financial manipulation and abuse. We developed educational materials about recognizing warning signs of financial exploitation, legal resources for challenging fraudulent conservatorship petitions, and support groups for people whose trust had been violated by family members. Working with former FBI agent Patricia Stevens, who left federal law enforcement to help run the foundation, we created a comprehensive database of corrupt professionals and criminal tactics that law enforcement agencies across the country could access when investigating financial fraud cases. Our research contributed to federal legislation, strengthening penalties for professionals who abuse positions of trust to commit crimes against vulnerable individuals. The foundation also provided direct assistance to families whose cases were similar to mine, offering cybersecurity expertise, legal referrals, and emotional support for people dealing with betrayal by trusted relatives. We recovered over $2 million for families across multiple states during our first year of operation, while helping law enforcement agencies identify and prosecute additional criminal networks. My personal life also found new purpose and meaning through the relationships I'd built during the investigation and recovery process. Patricia and I had developed a deep connection based on shared commitment to protecting vulnerable people from financial predators, and our professional partnership had evolved into a romantic relationship that brought stability and joy to my life after years of family dysfunction. We bought a beautiful house in Scottsdale, not the modest home I'd originally planned to purchase with my stolen savings, but a spacious property that serves as headquarters for the foundation and hosts support group meetings for financial abuse survivors. The house represents everything my family had tried to steal from me: security, independence, and the freedom to build a life based on my own values rather than their criminal expectations. The most satisfying moment came 8 months after the federal sentences, when I received a letter from Tyler in federal prison. His attempt at an apology was transparently manipulative, focusing more on his own suffering in prison than on the harm he'd caused to victims of his crimes. But his request for money to purchase commissary items provided an opportunity for the perfect response. I donated exactly the amount Tyler had requested to a victims' rights organization that provides legal assistance to families dealing with financial abuse, then sent Tyler the donation receipt along with a brief note. Your request has been fulfilled in a way that honors the people you hurt rather than enabling your continued selfishness. This is the last communication you'll receive from me. The life lesson that emerged from this experience extends far beyond simple warnings about family betrayal or financial security. Trust should always be earned and verified, especially when significant assets are involved. Family relationships don't exempt people from accountability for criminal behavior, and sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they really are beneath their carefully maintained facade. I learned that protecting yourself from predators isn't paranoia or antisocial behavior. It's wisdom gained through understanding that criminal thinking exists in all social contexts, including families and professional institutions that society traditionally considers trustworthy. The best defense against sophisticated criminals is being more prepared, more informed, and more strategically thinking than the people who want to destroy your life. But perhaps most importantly, I discovered that surviving betrayal and achieving justice creates opportunities to build something positive from the wreckage of broken trust. The foundation we created has helped hundreds of families protect themselves from financial predators, and our work has contributed to systemic changes that make similar crimes more difficult to commit successfully. The pain of family betrayal never completely disappears, but it can be transformed into purpose that protects other people from experiencing similar trauma. Justice isn't just about punishment for criminals. It's about creating systems and resources that prevent future victims from suffering the devastation that comes with having your trust violated by the people who should protect you most. As I write this conclusion in my home office, surrounded by thank you letters from families we've helped and awards recognizing our foundation's work, I understand that my family's attempt to destroy my life actually provided the catalyst for building something far more meaningful than anything I could have achieved if their betrayal had never occurred. The money they tried to steal has been multiplied through wise investments and returned to circulation, helping other families recover from financial abuse. The trust they violated has been replaced by relationships based on mutual respect and shared commitment to protecting vulnerable people. The future they tried to steal has been transformed into a legacy of justice that will continue long after the criminals who targeted me have been forgotten. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't getting even with people who've wronged you. Sometimes the greatest revenge is building something so positive and meaningful from their attempted destruction that their criminal actions become the foundation for justice that protects countless other innocent people. What would you do if you discovered that your own family had been planning to steal everything you'd worked for? Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and maintaining relationships with people who didn't deserve your trust? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you believe that justice should be served regardless of family relationships. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting content that exposes the reality of financial abuse within families. Subscribe for more true stories about overcoming betrayal and building meaningful lives from the ashes of broken trust. Remember that your security and well-being should never be sacrificed to maintain relationships with people who see you as a target, rather than a family member. Stay safe, stay smart, and never apologize for protecting yourself from people who would destroy your future for their own selfish gain.